So, quantum learning machine.
Okay,
Tell us, enlighten us.
so it's early days yet, and many different directions are being pursued. One direction is, to some extent, learning could be considered as part of feedback control. Basically, you have a signal, which you label in some way. You put it into a machine, and the signal gets distorted. But you want to be able to distort it in such a way that one kind of signal will be distorted distinguishably from another kind of signal. And the way that's done is by you keep measuring and feeding back. So let me give you an analogy. Imagine that there's some farmer who has a field full of sheep and goats, and come time to send them off to, their inevitable demise, you have to sort the sheep from the goats. And you could just go in there to the paddock and pick up a sheep and take it to one pen, and pick up a goat and take it to the other pen. That's a lot of work. Imagine you try to build an automated process that will do this, so that sheep and goats will go in randomly at one end, and there'll be a bunch of pulleys and ramps and gates and spring-loaded mechanisms and goodness knows what, which then puts sheep out one exit and goats out the other. But initially, it doesn't do anything other than random. So initially you started off in some arbitrary configuration, this complicated machine, and you put a sheep and a goat at random in one end, and the sheep is just as likely to come out the goat exit as the goat is just as likely to come out the sheep exit. But now what you do is the following. Every time an animal comes out the wrong exit, you go back and you can change the setting inside the machine. You tighten up some spring, or you close the gate. And all of those are irreversible processes. They have to be enough friction so you can change the machine irreversibly. Then you run it again. And you keep doing this over and over again until almost always sheep come out of the sheep exit and goats come out in the goat exit. There's always some small probability of error, but you can get it down low enough if you try hard enough. And fundamentally, what you've been doing is making measurements on whether the animal is a sheep or a goat and changing the configuration of the machine through feedback. So that's essentially what learning is. This machine now will classify four-legged sort of hairy bipeds, either as a sheep or a goat, and the farmer doesn't have to intervene at all. One important point to note there is that the machine is highly irreversible. It has to be, because initially you had high entropy, a random assortment of sheep and goats, but after you finish, the sheep are on one side and the goats on the other mostly, and so the entropy has clearly gone down. And so you're paid a considerable heat price in setting the machine to do that. So you can think of learning as a kind of feedback control, where you make measurements and you keep changing the setting of the machine so to get the right measurement outcomes you want. Now, you can think of a quantum machine learning as a bit like that. It's a kind of very complicated feedback control process where you have a way of putting in quantum states that may encode different classical information. It may turn out that you encode all the sheep as wave functions located to the left of the origin, and all the goats as wave functions located to the right of the origin. And inside there you have a quantum computer which has lots of settings, and you run it through and you measure it, and depending on what you measure, you go back and change the settings in the quantum computer. And you can set that up as a machine learning protocol. And so basically it's a way of generating probability transformations by using quantum mechanics to adjust the probabilities in the same way that classical machine learning changes probability distributions by adjusting settings in a classical computer.
And this will make learning much more efficient.
That's our hope. Yes, we believe that there will be more efficient learning protocols. And there may be a bit more to it than efficient. There's this question of expressivity. And that is, if you build a classical machine to transform one probability distribution into another, you have to make certain that the thing you're trying to learn can be distinguished within that class of probability distribution. So you have to make certain that there's enough variability in how you can transform distributions that you can learn some function. And in deep neural networks, this is done by just putting in enough parameters into the model. In the quantum case, it may well be that the sort of distributions that quantum mechanics can exhibit, violate Bell inequalities, all sorts of other weird and wonderful higher order correlation functions, may give you the ability to express functions more compactly than you might otherwise do, just because quantum distributions are of a different character to classical probability distributions.
Expressivity. I still understand what it means. Why did they choose this word?
Actually, it's not a word I chose. It's a word that's used in the machine learning community. It's somewhat ambiguous, but the key is let's take an example of pictures of dogs and cats. So dogs and cats are recorded on a digital camera. You have this massive array of pixels which record information about color and intensity and all the rest of it. If you just looked at the distribution of, say, intensity on there, they both look pretty much the same. They sort of fluctuate a bit. And if I just looked at them one after another, it just looks pretty random. But somewhere in there is the correlations between different pixels that really matter as to whether or not it's a picture of a cat or a picture of a dog. So what you need to be able to do is take those correlations, which in the raw picture are spread out all over the place, and force them into very characteristic output distributions that says, if the correlations are dog-like, the distribution will be bunched up over here, and if the correlations are cat-like, the distributions will be bunched up over there. It could be that you just don't have enough control in your classical learning machine. The correlations are just too complex to simplify into a simple classification like that. The miracle is we can do it, right? That if you're clever enough, you can build a deep learning network that will do it. With huge numbers of parameters and many, many steps. So the hope is that quantum mechanics may enable us to encode interesting correlations more efficiently. That's what I mean by expressive.